Hi, everyone. It's Virginia Stanley here with my trusty cohorts, Chris Connolly and Lainey Mays, and we're here with another episode of Door to Door. And today we are really excited and honored to have with us the one and only fan favorite, Susan Wiggs. Hello, Susan.
Hi, hello everybody. Thank you for joining us and thank you guys for setting this up. This is amazing. It's awesome to see your happy faces and, feel a little bit normal talking books this morning.
Well, thank you. We're so thrilled to have you here. You have been such a supporter of libraries coming to the American Library Association and always connecting and always, just being ready, willing, and able to meet with librarians and speak to patrons. And so let's talk about this book, a book about a bookstore, a book about a woman who's struggling with internal struggle and her family and this fabulous bookstore. And everybody who reads this book, I know, will just want to open a bookstore or have that bookstore because it's amazing. So, Susan, you're the author of more than 50 novels, including the beloved Lakeshore Chronicles series and New York Times bestsellers, including Family Tree. Your books have been translated into 24 languages. It's probably more than that by now. It's got to be. But this book, The Lost and Found Bookshop, which goes on sale July 7th.
I know. How pretty is that?
It's pretty.
That is a thing of beauty.
Do I see a tote bag behind you, Susan?
I do. Yes. Thank you. HarperCollins for producing a complimentary tote bag. Those are available to people who order the signed book through independent booksellers.
Okay, now we're going to stop right now because we want this to be absolutely perfect. And for some reason, you're breaking up, and we want everybody to feel this. Chris, do you think that Susan should start again? What do we think? Or do we keep going for a little bit and see if the kinks work out? What do you think, Chris? Chris, you're muted.
Yep. Susan, could you tell us what the weather's like? Let's give it a little stretch here. I want to hear you speak a little bit more.
I wonder if the internet is, I turned everything off. I restarted.
You sound fine now.
Smooth as silk. That's
now
weird.
You sound fine. You sound
That's
okay
weird.
now.
Okay. Well,
all right.
I'm sure that I'm close to my microphone, wherever that is.
All right.
Silky right now, so I think we can proceed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thanks for that.
Okay. All right. So here we go. Lost and Found Bookshop. What a glorious book this is. It is so it's so tender, it's so heartfelt, it's so honest, it's so interesting. I love this bookstore. I want to live there. I love the smell of the coffee and that old grinder that you've got in there. It's wonderful. So, okay, let's back up. Library Journal, starred review. I love this review. Wiggs, also the author of the Oysterville Sewing Circle, hits another home run with a heady mix of women's fiction and romance. Her sophisticated prose, filled with quaint book and author quotes, tells the delightful tale of an accidental, reluctant bookshop owner, her beautiful yet unconventional family, and the historic San Francisco building they've lived and worked in for over a century. An unputdownable, true book lover's book that fans of women's fiction, slow-burning romance, and the novels of Nora Roberts and Kristen Hanna will love. Okay, we have pages of quotes, pages of raves, but I'm going to turn it over to you, Susan. Tell us about this glorious book, The Lost and Found Bookshop.
Well, thank you for doing that. And it's so gratifying I don't read reviews. I wait until somebody sends one that they want me to see, because I don't go looking for them, because sometimes, you find one that kind of lands wrong. But it's been so gratifying to get the feedback on this book in particular, because book reviewers are book lovers. And so it's really gratifying when somebody reads the book that you want them to read, because reading is such a creative act. We all read a different book. And I love that people have a different takeaway from this book. And as you mentioned before, it's kind of definitely a more tender book than the Oysterville Sewing Circle. It's very, very personal to me because it involves some of my personal situation very transmuted into a drama. I don't have enough drama in my life to be interesting to write about, but I always wanted to be a bookseller. You can probably tell that readers will know, oh, here's her fantasy coming to life on paper. And I always tried to envision my bookstore. Imagine if they said, you can have any bookstore you wanted, where would it be? What would it look like? And, I was thinking that the creaky old wooden floors and the ladders that slide up and down so that you can reach the high shelves. I wanted a mixture of old and new. It had to be in San Francisco because San Francisco. And so I kind of poured all of my fantasies into this bookshop, but I gave it to a really, really troubled young woman. And the reason that I did that is that I wanted to create a journey. I didn't want to read about somebody who gets everything she wants in this fantasy bookshop and lives happily ever after. And so I kind of made Natalie, the main character, a real life person dealing with life situations that get flung at you. And so it's really the journey of somebody who reaches a moment of change in her very settled, predictable life that she's crafted for herself, and suddenly is flung into a situation that she feels very unprepared for, but very responsible to deal with. Because I'm always a sucker for stories about people who are reluctant heroes. They didn't choose this path, and yet they're stuck with it. And so there we have Natalie, and she's very emotionally cautious. And yet she was raised by a woman named Blythe, her mother. The name doesn't really, there's no secret about how I came to that name. And so Blythe raised her. She was a free spirit, and she was a single mom. And to Natalie, it felt very chaotic, but to Blythe, it was different. And so suddenly we have a bit of a reversal here, and Natalie is now in charge of this mess that her mother kind of left behind. And so that's where we meet Natalie. And I also had such fun populating this story with people that, I can't base them on real people because real people are way too complicated for fiction, but the authors and the readers who come through the bookshop and the people that we meet along the way are all inspired by the people that I've met in and around the book world. So that's been it was such a pleasure to write this book. And as my own situation as a caregiver for my elderly mom was unfolding at the same time, that made it feel really personal. And that's one reason that there's some real emotional moments in the book.
So you're referring there to Grandy, Natalie's grandfather, who can you talk a little bit about the history of this landmark building, this bookstore, and what it was? Do you want to, or I don't want to.
Yeah, it's good. It's because I wanted an old building, and I did some research into, of course, the San Francisco earthquake and fire of 1906. And I found that about 25% of the buildings survived. So this was one of the survived buildings. And it's been in this particular family, Natalie's family, for generations. But it started life as a saloon / brothel. And it was called the 10-foot ladder because people tended to name their saloons after, how they would act. And so I thought, well, that's one way that I can probably craft this around a building that had a different life. And the other thing that I read about was in my research was that the soldiers who were deployed to the Spanish-American War in 1898 tended to have to leave their things behind, when they were going to be shipped off to the Philippines. They had to leave their things behind, and sometimes they would hide them in little hidey holes in their favorite saloon in the Bay Area. And so that was a little historical nugget. And I thought, wow, when a building is falling down, you know, you might find things hidden in the walls. And that's how the Lost and Found bookshop kind of, they start finding things. And Natalie has a lot of healing to do in her personal life. And so one way that reconnects her with people is that she does find these artifacts in the walls of this old falling apart building. You know, the person who's helping her, you know, restore the building is a very interesting character. And so that was the genesis of that. And I love to build the world of a novel in a way that kind of reflects the character's journey in a novel. And so we have this dilapidated, falling down old vintage building and a historic street in San Francisco. And as she's rebuilding her life and reconnecting, the building comes back to life as well. And so I've enjoyed that. And that has the connection of that to my personal life is one of the things that he does many things. He's a designer, but he restores old buildings. And he's actually just finishing a 1915 cottage in a town nearby. And it is so interesting to find artifacts that people 100 years ago in the walls of a building.
Interesting. Yeah. I'm just going to stop you one more second. Chris and Lainey, are we breaking up or are we okay?
Yeah, Susan, I might ask, if you don't mind, if we can take a quick second, a quick break. Would you mind closing your Zoom and coming back on with us? Do you still have that link so you can join us? So viewers watching at home, we're just going to try bringing Susan back on and seeing.
All right, talk amongst yourself.
Yes, we will. We'll talk about how good you've been. So thank you. And again, viewers, we'll be right back with Susan Wiggs. We just want to make sure again that everything is coming out loud and clear.
So are we staying on or are we?
We are on. We're on. The people are still watching. So we're here live. Lainey?
Yes. I just want to say I loved this book. It was so fun and so great to listen to. Can you hear me, Virginia? You look like
yes.
Okay, good. So good to read and listen to if you're listening to the audiobook. But yeah, I'm excited to hear what she has to say about all the books that she jammed in there because there are some good ones and they really brought back a lot of memories.
All right, let's bring Susan back on.
Oh, is she there? Okay.
Yeah.
And are we watching on Facebook Live? Or are we watching for our buds? We have buds watching?
We have buds watching. Yes, a lot of people, a lot of fans. We have someone from, looks like Greece watching. Karen says, hi, Susan. I've read every book you have written that I can find. Thank you.
Are we related? My cousin Karen.
Karen Fogarty, maybe. And then we have Michelle Jackson. Love your books. Can't wait to read this one. And then we have librarian friends watching who just are, again, sharing the love. And Ellen says, I thought the historical segments added depth to the story. So this work and research does not go unnoticed by any means, Susan. So there you go. Do we want to resume? Where did we leave off then as far as talking about this book and the inspiration behind it?
Well, I can address what your reader just said about the historical segment. I thought that there would be a bigger a backstory that kind of reflected the front story, and I had to really do some fancy footwork to make sure that the story that I found out that happened in the past, it was during the Spanish-American War and during the earthquake and fire, reflected a real historical situation. It wasn't based on any single one, but I loved that. I was fascinated by the story of William Randolph Hearst, which I kind of knew. We all kind of know it, but the more I read about it, the more fascinated I got by it. And there wasn't much written about Hearst when he was a really young man. He had been picked at Harvard. He played a prank. I forget what the
and
prank.
I'm sorry, Susan, I don't mean to interrupt. Could you maybe step back and just where you started talking about this segment, because you were kind of, the connection was a little iffy there.
Oh, I'm so sorry about this connection. See,
it's okay. Sometimes you sound great. It's just, Yeah, just there, just breaking up.
That's frustrating. I'm sorry. Yeah. So anyway, the historical segment takes place during the Spanish-American War, and then subsequently the earthquake and fire of 1906. And then there's a little piece that I had to tell about World War I. And it's ironic in this moment of time, because one of the things that they find out is that the person who kind of established their family was a man of color. He was a Buffalo Soldier, and they had never known that until they dig into their family history and found that out. All they knew is that great grandma never got her widow's benefits from the man that she was married to during the Spanish-American War. And it turns out it was disallowed because he was a man of color. And so I researched that as well. And so I'm very, at this moment in time, I'm very aware that this didn't come out of nowhere. You know, this current situation didn't come out of nowhere. It has roots, you know, from the very beginnings of, you know, 400 years ago, but we're talking about now 100 years ago. And so that was another fascinating and kind of heartbreaking piece of my research that I did for this book.
Well,
What else can I tell you about Lost and Found?
You could tell us about some of the books that are in the book.
Oh, that's a fun thing. That one, my editor, Rachel at William Morrow, calls them Easter eggs. They're little things that are, you know, talk about lost and found. Almost every book that I mention or cite in the Lost and Found bookshop is a book that I love and admire, and or is by a friend of mine. And so that's why, you know, this troubled woman with her marriage in crisis comes in looking for a book about a troubled woman, you know, in crisis. And it turns out to be Love and Trouble by Claire Dederer. And she's a friend and neighbor of mine, you know, here on Bainbridge Island. And so I got to, you know, slip that in there. There's a bar that they go to, a literary bar, where all the cocktails are named after Bay Area famous authors and books. And one of my favorite writers and people that I know, and I don't get to hang out with her enough, is Gail Tsukiyami. And she has a book out, I believe the same day as Lost and Found Bookshop, called The Color of Water or The Color of Air. Now I can't remember.
Color of Air.
The Color of Air. Yeah, she's a fantastic writer. I'm a huge admirer of her. And initially when we were going to have a book tour, because it was before the pandemic, I had this fantasy that I would go, you know, somewhere in the Bay Area to have a book signing, and Gail and I would get to do something together for our books because they were published on the same day. But obviously that never came to pass. So, but hopefully all the books that I mention in the Lost and Found bookshop would be books that people will pick up and read. I did make up a few titles, and then the other inside story is that of this is that the books that, let's see, the book that she's reading on her mother's nightstand is a book that I wrote, but they changed the title. And so she's reading bits of this. It's actually an advanced reading copy, because booksellers get, I don't know if you can see this, they get a review copy. And so she's reading that on her mother's nightstand, and it's from a book called Acts of Light. And that book was later published as Map of the Heart. Yeah.
So
I love
fun.
those Easter eggs. That's really fun.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's great.
Yeah. So books play a lot around this theme of memory in the book. So, you know, not only her grandfather's actual memory, but, you know, she's got to remember a lot about her family who's going through a lot in the bookstore. So what do these books bring to her, and do they bring memories, and what do they hold for her?
I bet that we all have this. We almost always can remember what book we were reading at a big moment in our lives. Think about it, you know, when, you know, a significant event happens, when there was, you know, I don't know, a graduation, a marriage, a death, something like that. For me, I almost always remember what book I was reading, and often what I was wearing. And
wow.
so I think books kind of belong to certain seasons in our life. And I'm not one to go back and read a lot of books because there are too many new yummy books to read and I don't have time. But it's interesting. Every once in a while, I'll pick up a book that I remember just knowing and loving at some point in my life. And then a different person years later. And, you know, how does that work? And now it's some of the books that I loved. Oh my God, in the 80s, I just devoured bodice ripper historical romances. And if I go back now and I read The Flame and the Flower or Shayna or something like that, I'm like, ooh, I don't want my granddaughter to do that. But oh my God, I love those books. Political incorrectness and everything.
That is so funny. And it's true, though. You are a different person. You know,
Yeah.
20 years later, you pick up something and you want to have the same experience that you did then and you can't.
No, that's true. And the other thing is we want to share with our kids and grandkids the books that we loved so much. And if it doesn't land just right with my daughter or my granddaughter, I get a little exasperated. I'm like, well, don't you get it? Charlotte's Web, come on. And my granddaughter, Clara, she'll be like, I don't want to read that book. It's too sad. I'm like, no, it's not. It's the circle of life. You can't force somebody to read the same book you read. And that's why I say reading is an ultimately creative act because the reader perceives the book and you can't control that. And so I really do love this moment in the life cycle of a book when it's not mine anymore. You know,
Yeah.
I sort of fling it out into the world and it doesn't belong to me. It belongs to readers. And so there's something that a line from the book that they're using to promote the book. There's a book for everything. I don't know if you can see that. Meaning, whatever you're going through in your life, whatever you're thinking about, whatever you're experiencing, chances are you can find a book that reflects that back at you. And so that's, you know, that's why she was raised on Judy Blume books, you know, because Judy Blume certainly wrote a book for everything. So that was something that I really believe. And I was so grateful when marketing people kind of embody that little slogan. We can talk about that endlessly.
Yeah. Well, that's very much like Natalie when she's trying to find the perfect book for the little girl who comes in, Dorothy. And she's, you know, and she tells her too, she tells the, you know, there's something for everybody. And it's funny how you really make that clear that sometimes the book finds you.
Yes. Yes. Well, and you know, the other thing that I wanted to do, oh God, you know, I have these crazy ideas. I have too many books to write, but I have these crazy ideas. I actually wanted to write the Trevor Dashwood books. There's a fantasy, beautiful, you know, love interest of an author. And he's like the sexy male version of J.K. Rowling. And he's written a series of books called the, gosh, now I've lost what his series of books are called. The flip side books, because he will tell a book from one point of view and then you flip the book over and it's from another point of view. So it would be like, you know, brother and sister, or, you know, so the same story from two different points of view. And so I dreamed up this whole series and I thought I could write that in my spare time.
Good. I don't know where you're finding all your spare time, but it's pretty amazing, I have to say.
I would love to see books in that series. Maybe they've been done, but you know, that was what my fictional children's author was working on, were the flip side books.
Yeah. And the kid was so excited about that because she was showing how, you know, you can flip it over and it's a completely different point of view. It's really cool. I don't know. You know, I was telling you earlier that, and we've taken our, just, you're not alone, but we've taken us off video to hopefully help with the sound because we're having a couple of little bumps on the sound. So we're hoping that maybe if we take our video away, that will help a little bit. I don't have a printed galley. It's on my desk. I think it's actually a bound manuscript from months and months ago when we first had those made when you came to New York. But I took pictures of my e-reader with my phone and printed them out because There are some lines in here that are just so absolutely beautiful.
Aw.
When you say, okay, I have to read this. It's one sentence. He summoned a smile for Blythe. No, not Blythe, Natalie. So we're talking about when the grandfather is looking for Natalie.
Oh,
And
yes.
Blythe was gone suddenly and irretrievably, like a zephyr shooting into the night sky, leaving a trail of moonlit particles that swirled in brief, unspeakable beauty and then faded into nothing.
Oh.
Oh, for God's sake.
Oh my God.
That is absolute poetry. It's beautiful. The lines in this book, I wish I had something to underline. Sorry, Morrow marketing team, I'm underlining in my mind. But I mean, Susan, these lines are so poetic. I printed out so many different lines and excerpts and just these lovely sentences that are they're so heartrending and so beautiful and so powerful. I just love this book.
Oh, well, thank you, Virginia. You know, when I write a really heartfelt line like that, it's usually when I finally step out of my own way and get rid of all my blocks and say, I'm going to write down how I think it really would feel to have a loss like this, because it's no spoiler to say that this elderly gentleman who is in the early stage of dementia and had a lot of loss in his life, but you know, probably the most grievous one is that he lost his child, his daughter, and how raw that is in the grand scheme of things. And I tried to encapsulate his feelings without making him like completely nuts. And so thank you for noticing that. And I love readers who are sensitive to language and nuance the way you are. That's who we write for. It's really gratifying. So thank you.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's just it's an exceptional book. Chris and Lainey are on, though we can't see them. I thought that we should share some of the readers, the book club kit. Chris and Lainey, are you on and can you show that right now? They will when they.
Yeah,
Okay.
if you can give me a second to pull it up here, Virginia. I think
Yep.
Lainey had it. She's not
While
on the
he's pulling
broadcast
it
right
up, I'll
now.
show you that the beautiful lines that Virginia is reading. They don't come out of nowhere, but here's how they start. I write all of my book. I know. I'm a mess, right?
Okay, wait.
Wait. Yeah, I had it upside down. All my books start out in these
Oh,
weird big notebooks in fountain pen, and so yeah, because I'm a mess, right?
okay, wait.
Yeah, I had it upside down. All my books start out in these weird big notebooks in fountain pen, and so yeah, because I'm a mess, right?
Oh. I think we're having technical difficulties right now. Apologies, readers, watchers, and readers. Let's see here.
Sorry.
The group guide is well worth the trouble to look for, though. It's really, they did such a beautiful job with it.
Yeah.
Apologies, readers, watchers, and readers.
We're getting feedback. I don't know what's happening. We're having, I'm so disappointed.
The group guide is well worth the trouble to look.
Hey,
Chris?
Lainey, just make sure everyone's muted if you're playing the video. I don't think that's you, Susan.
Sorry, I jumped back on because I love this readers group guide and I was too fast and I was not on mute on Facebook because I was watching. So I am muted now. And
viewers, your patience will be rewarded. So Lainey's going to share the readers group guide. And Susan, if you could talk about that once we have it up on screen, we can move forward. Again, thanks for your patience, and viewers, thanks for your patience.
Okay, I'm seeing the front cover of the reading group guide, and I take zero credit for this, but it's one of my favorite things about this book. It was created by our good friends at HarperCollins and my friend Ashley, who helped me with online things. And it's a pretty comprehensive 10-page PDF that you can download or even print out. And so we start out with questions written by one of the smartest people in publishing that I've ever worked with, Rachel, my editor. So she has some discussion questions to kind of provoke discussion about the book. But probably this is my favorite page, the banana bread. And I learned this in a cooking lesson from America's Test Kitchen, I think it was. And the thing that makes this banana bread so yummy is that first you make banana syrup. You make them all like wet and goopy, and then you boil the syrup until it's reduced down to this incredible like concentrated banana syrup, and you add that to the banana bread and it makes it amazing. So yeah, banana bread and book clubs, for some reason they go together. And we invite book clubs to have me show up at your book club meeting. I'm happy to do that. And so there's a way to schedule that. We've given you an email address to invite you to have a Zoom meeting with me. But I found one thing that I found about book clubs is sometimes when the author shows up, it kind of stifles discussion because they might want to say something that they feel is critical of the book or that they like about the book, and they don't want to say it from the author. And I'm here to tell you, in my other life, I was a 5th grade teacher. And so there's nothing you can say about me that is going to surprise me or disappoint me or anything. I just love book discussions, and I love my own book club that I belong to. So hopefully I'll get an invite to come to your group. And this next page, there's a book for everything. This is, I think it might be comprehensive, but it's a big, long list of all the books that are cited in the book that I wrote, because my main character is a bookseller. And so what does she do all day? She recommends books and authors. And so please, 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 they even wrote it as a checklist so that you can check off the ones that you've tried. And so yes, please check out the books that are cited in the book. And then this page, I actually failed on a couple of these bookstore trivia questions, but they're really fun. And so some Q&A, some little bookstore coloring page. Coloring is very relaxing. God knows we need more of that in our lives. Print out the coloring page. And then finally, that's a screenshot of the tote bag that my lovely publisher created for us. So thank you. Thank you for the people who created that. Thank you to the book clubs that will download it and use it in their book club meetings. I really love that little piece that we're all privileged to have. And I assume we're going to put a link where you can find it on the web.
Yes, it will be downloaded tomorrow and put on it would be on Susan Wiggs' website tomorrow, and it will also be on HarperCollins.com tomorrow. So which is Chris or Lainey, which of you, who of you is sharing that? Can you just put up one more time, Lainey?
Sure.
Okay, can you scroll slowly to the second page? Well, yeah, go up to the top. Okay, so stop right there. So you can see that there's the reading group guide, all of the things that Susan just talked about, those trivia cards, which is super fun. And Lainey, just go to the reading group guide to the next page. Great questions in here. I was looking at these and they are, I love number 3.
That's my favorite too.
Is it?
Yes.
Well, it's my favorite childhood book too, Charlotte's Web. And when her friend reads a section from that, I think that's such a great question. If you could have any book be part of your memorial service, what would it be? These are great questions. I just think that you could get lost in this for hours while you're chomping away on that delicious banana bread. And if it wasn't 85 degrees in New York, trust me, I've been making that right now.
Yeah.
Lainey, could you just scroll beyond that back to the page where people can Zoom? So there's the delicious recipe. Now, again, we are going to have this available on Susan Wiggs' website tomorrow, as well as HarperCollins.com. So don't think that we've just swept through it and now you're thinking, how do I get to her? So all of that information will be there, but I just wanted to reiterate tomorrow, go back and all of this will be there. And it's just a great resource. I also love that you made that checklist, Susan, and you did put Charlotte's Web in there, and also Gail Tsukiyama's The Color of Air, which is so many great books in here. So good. Mary Higgins Clark, Mary Kay Andrews, that cookbook, amazing. Anyway, super fun. I love this. This is just great fun. But I mean, a book about a bookstore and this just really wonderful, dynamic between these people and this main character, and it's her grandfather. How she played it safe until she decided not to. And I think that's where her life really sort of takes flight. There was another line in your book when Natalie is going through her mother's books in the bookstore. She says, Mom had a habit of marking passages she liked or wanted to remember. One of them, tagged with a stick-on page marker, jumped out at her. How would you live your life differently if you could start over? What would you do? Who would you be? Where would you go? And what would you embrace? And I think that's the whole framework of this book, isn't it?
It is. It is, because I feel like in the beginning of the book, she's very emotionally afraid. She's not a risk taker. And there is a kind of life that you can live like that. And I think a lot of people do. But ultimately, the risk that you take is, commensurate with the reward that you get back. Sometimes you can fall flat, sometimes you can fail. I've been a published author for 32 years, I think, 33 years. I sold my first book, or I published my first book in 1987. So I know about risk. I've fallen flat, I failed, I got back up, and I wouldn't trade it for anything, but I'm not going to lie and say that it was a real easy ride all the time.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. Just like Natalie, as you said before, you didn't want to make a book that's all about like you get everything you want. Then
Right.
it's just,
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Chris, Lainey, do we have questions from people who are watching?
Well, we have some great comments, and I'll look for questions as well. We do have some. I just wanted to read this quote from Patricia Reed, who said, "One of the best books I have read this year. Loved it. I was highlighting like crazy in my ARC, which is appropriate, about the best quotes, and now need an HC for my shelves." And then regarding the quote, Virginia, that you read, that small passage, Betty says, "My father and mother-in-law both had dementia." That sentence was profound and eloquent and paints a beautiful picture. You are truly gifted and have such a gift with words. So yeah, I think sometimes the novelizations that tackle these topics really, they're such a valuable conduit for people who share that experience. So Susan, I wanted to make sure you were aware of Betty's words.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, one book that I don't know if I cited it in the Lost and Found Bookshop, but a book that has meant a lot to me personally has one of the quirkiest titles I've ever heard. It's called Advice to Future Corpses and Those Who Love Them. And it's a nonfiction book by Sally Tisdale. She's an RN, and it's about dementia and end of life issues. And one thing that she taught me that I kind of accessed as I was writing this book, and I access when I'm helping my mom, is not to try to fix the situation, just to listen to it and let it in. And it's kind of fascinating the way mom's mind will work sometimes. And that's kind of why the passage that Virginia read is a little whimsical, because they have these flights of fantasy that are very real to them, or my mom does anyway. And so I tried to bring that situation to life a little bit here and there in the book.
I think you handled it so beautifully, Susan, and so authentically. It really resonates, and I think, yeah, I think you've just very respectfully.
Oh, thank you. I should tell our listeners, I used to be really scared of Virginia because she's such a ferocious book person, and she has this huge reputation in publishing. And it was like, oh my God, I got to meet Virginia Stanley. I'm so scared. What if she doesn't like my books? And it turns out that Virginia has been like the most supportive and kindest, one of the supportive and kindest people that I've got to meet in publishing. And one thing, a little backstory on this particular book is I happened to have just turned in the manuscript for it, and it was so hot off the press we didn't have anything but the paper manuscript, the digital file, whatever. And I came to New York, and Virginia organized a group of librarians to all meet and have lunch one day. Do you remember the name of that restaurant? It was such a classic basement Italian restaurant where they kept bringing,
Yes,
we were in like a wine cave.
yeah.
And they kept bringing platters of the most delicious food. And I thought, she's my new best friend. I'm only going to hang out with Virginia from now on. That was so much fun. And we had such high hopes for this book because we didn't know about pandemic. It was, a year and a half ago. And so, we were all brainstorming all the different, fun ways that we were going to launch this book. And this is fun, but it's definitely not what we were picturing in that awesome restaurant, which I definitely wish I could go back to.
First of all, I didn't know that you were afraid of me. That's
Oh my God, you're very scary.
really? Oh my God. Jeez, I had no clue. Well, I'm sorry that I scared you, but you're very kind, and it's going to drive me crazy, and I'm going to find the name of that restaurant before we log off.
It was way downtown.
Yeah, it was not far from Harper. Do you guys remember, Chris and Lane? It was like
Yeah. Susan, do you remember right after we went back to the office and you took this picture with the printing press?
Oh, nice.
Yes, I did.
That was fun. It was a fun day.
Okay, that's a picture of HarperCollins. You have like my favorite lobby. It's just so cool that you have an actual letterpress, and there's a letterpress in the Lost and Found bookshop in the basement, because before it was a bookshop, it was a typewriter repair shop, and they had a printing press in the bottom. And I don't know how you guys got it up to the 20 something floor, but yeah, that's a cool feature, cool thing to see every day on your way to work.
Yeah, it is a pretty cool thing. Well, we had a great time that day with you, and the librarians were just so thrilled to meet you and to get that Giardino d'Orio.
Oh, there you go. Garden of Gold. Yes. Wow.
Garden of Gold.
I hope they're still around. Maybe they're doing
God.
like curbside delivery or something, because what a fantastic meal that was. It was the most old school, delicious Italian food. It's everything you dream about when you think of Italian feasts. We had a feast. It was great.
Yeah, that's so nice that you say that. That was fun, and hopefully when we get back, we'll do it again, because it was fun. It was a cozy little room, and boy, these guys just kept bringing these big old platters of stuff, and we just had a great time for ourselves. Yeah, Giardino d'Oro. I hope I'm saying that.
I'm wishing that we could, when we get through this, maybe we'll have to have a reunion there.
Wouldn't that be fun? Let's
awesome.
Make it a thing. We're going to do that, and we'll bring back some librarian friends and have a good time for ourselves, and toast to this wonderful book, because it's it's a delicious read, and it's I don't know, it's just it sort of envelops you, and these characters it's lovely, and it's intriguing. And the characters are so fleshed out and wonderful and real. And I think, again, I think the thing I'm responding to most, of course, that beautiful, beautiful bookstore. I can smell that coffee that she's making, and Grandy, her grandfather, and the way you treat, his, dementia and how his life is changing. I just think that you have painted a beautiful, respectful picture, and so interesting with all of these books within this book. It's just wonderful. Thank you for writing it.
Oh, you're so welcome. And, one thing that the publisher did with these beautiful advanced reading copy editions is they gave them to independent booksellers and solicited comments coming back. And one of the things that has been so worrisome to us in the pandemic is the bookshops that had to shut down and cease, close their doors to patrons. And so I did have some feedback from booksellers who said, I grabbed your book on the way out the door, thanks for keeping it alive. And one of the things that I have been so blown away by is the creativity and the can-do spirit of independent booksellers. They've been amazing supporters, and they've tried their best. And so I did sign hundreds and hundreds of copies of books that are available at independent booksellers. And there's a link to all the ones who have the signed books on I believe on my Facebook page. And one of the little shout outs that I gave to a writer is to Suzanne Selfers. She's a well-known children's author, and she bought a bookstore in Paulsbo, Washington, in the Kitsap Peninsula, not too far from Seattle, a little pretty well-established mom and pop bookstore called Liberty Bay Books. And it was a year in the making, and she took over the bookstore and launched it on February 1st of this year. So pretty much the first thing that happened to her as she opened her spanking new author-owned bookstore is that she had to close. And so, and she was actually going to be the culmination of my big book tour that I was going to do, up the West Coast. I was going to end there and do a big event at Suzanne's new bookstore, Liberty Bay Books, and I wasn't able to do it. But she does have signed copies of the book, and she's still in business, and so she's definitely one of the ones on our list. So shout out to Suzanne, amazing writer. I mean, kids just adore her books, and a lot of them are cited in the Lost and Found Bookshop. And for having the can-do spirit of an independent bookseller.
That's lovely. And shout out to librarians too, who are partnering with bookstores and hosting events virtual. And again, to everyone out there listening, if you are interested in having Susan visit a bookstore or your library, you can reach out to Susan directly at that email address, which you'll get tomorrow if you haven't already written it down, or you can reach out to the library marketing department. You can write to any one of us, and we will do everything to make that happen. And Susan, I know that you've been doing a lot of virtual talks, and so folks, whatever the glitches were today, that's not the norm. So don't shy away from having Susan come and visit your bookstore or library, because I don't know whatever's going on today. But there you go, because it's been working so far. And it's a terrific way to connect authors, libraries, booksellers, readers together. So that's Susan at SusanWiggs.com to set up a Zoom, or you can certainly talk to us. I think we did have one question. I don't know if you answered this one, Susan, as we were having our technical difficulties. Leslie Rose wanted to know if you ever lived in San Francisco, or is that a place that you'd like to live? Did you already answer that question? I don't think you did, right?
No, I didn't. I love San Francisco, and no, I never have lived there. And it's kind of one of those fantasy places. If I could pick anywhere on the globe to live, that would definitely be on my list. I love San Francisco, and have not spent nearly enough time there. And so as I was researching this book, I definitely, tried to explore the different parts of San Francisco. And one of the things that was cool is Natalie, the main character, she kind of came of age, grew up and came of age in the 90s in San Francisco. And it was an interesting place. It was before, Silicon Valley exploded, but it was still a super, super cool place to be culturally. And so most of her childhood memories that I explore in the book are based on memoirs that I read about growing up in San Francisco in the 90s and things like that. So I have a lot of affection for that city and would love to spend much more time there, and was hoping to do that this summer on book tour, but not happening.
Yeah. Oh. Well, listen, there's thank goodness for technology, and we can, you can Zoom yourself. It's really sort of amazing, don't you think, how libraries and bookstores have they figured it out in a very short amount of time, how to do curbside pickup, or just like libraries, they were going from physical books to ebooks, and still making sure that they were serving patrons, and of course getting your book loaded up front and center and ready to send out there into the world. And we thank them, and we thank you, and we thank everybody for listening in today. Susan, before we go, because we're almost at the hour, is there anything that you wanted to share with us before we say a goodbye? Or Chris and Lainey, if there's anything I've forgotten?
No, you know what? This discussion has just re-energized me about this book, because as you know, it's a book that, I finished writing a year ago. And so I'm on to the next one, which has the working title, I hope I get to keep it. It's called American Princess. And it takes place in the Washington, D.C. area. So I'm excited to explore that. Now, in parting, I'm so grateful to everybody who's had to pivot and regroup and figure out a way to still have books and reading be relevant in this crazy time that we're in. And so thank you so much. I want to hear from people far and wide, and hopefully will, and see you around the internet.
Yeah, I think that you will see people around the internet, because they're going to be reaching out to you to come to their libraries. And that's what we've been focusing on, is connecting authors and readers through virtual events. So everyone out there, please let us know, and we will do our best to bring Susan to you. So that's the Lost and Found Bookshop, going on sale in July, and we congratulate you. And I am envious of anybody who gets to read this for the first time. You won't forget these people. It's pretty wonderful. So Susan, thank you so much again for bringing this story and these people to us. I do want to mention that we will have Gail Tsukiyama on Facebook Live with her editor, associate publisher, Tara Parsons, and that will be on July 7th at 2 o'clock. And then the world famous Adult Library Love Fest Adult Books Book Buzz will be on July 9th. So you can go to Library Love Fest and find out more about that. Chris, Lainey, any parting words, my friends?
I just want to thank you, Susan. You were one of the first authors I think I met. I believe you came to my first ALA midwinter, and so you set an extremely high bar for authors there to come, and you've always been so gracious with your time.
I was not scared of you. I was not scared of you.
No, we were just both scared of Virginia.
My nephew.
Yeah, that's the energy I try to give off. And again, I think librarians, your fans, they also appreciate you coming on. As a reminder, the Lost and Found Bookshop was the July Library Reads pick, so the librarians have spoken.
Oh my God, amazing. Amazing.
That means a lot. That's top 10 books voted on by public librarians across the US. They choose their top 10 for every month. And of course, this book was amongst those top 10. So thank you so much for joining us today. We really do appreciate it.
Yeah. I think I dare say, I think I met you at my first conference ever too. How funny is that? Both of us. For midwinter, both of, yeah, that's funny. And speaking of Library Reads pick, you submitted an audio for our podcast, so everybody should go listen to that. Thank you for doing that. And that's Library Love Fest on SoundCloud, so go check it out.
That's a great recording. That's very fun. You're popping champagne. It's
Good.
very fun. So yes, for sure. Go and check that out on Library Love Fest. And I say that this has been a very fun and informative hour and entertaining. And I'm sorry I scared you 20 years ago. Hope it's okay now.
Yeah, no, we're good now. Thank you again, you guys. Have a wonderful rest of your summer. Happy reading to everybody.
Thank
You
you.
too, Susan. Thank you.
Same to you. Be well. Thanks all for watching.
Yep, y'all
Bye,
take care.
everyone.
You too. Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye.